Well, good evening. I'm your host, Robert Wilson with Cowboy Wisdom Podcast. Tonight's podcast is 7 ways why thinking you're better than somebody is mind-invented insecurity. Because superiority is the ego's camouflage for unhealed inadequacies. The moment you need to feel above someone, your mind is revealing the insecurities within you. It refuses to face. The insecurity it refuses to face. Superiority isn't confidence. It's a survival reflex pretending to be strength. Because comparison is the museum where your mind stores the oldest fears. Thinking you're better is never about the other person. It's about the identity you're terrified to outgrow. Because when you're thinking you're ahead of somebody and you got that egotistical arrogance going, you're actually living in fear. Because you're afraid of the other person may know something, you understand things you'd never do. The ego invents hierarchy to avoid confronting its reality, its frailness. Because true awareness doesn't elevate you over people, it elevates you beyond your illusions. Because most of the illusions are in the mind, are in the museum mind. Superiority isn't a mind-made insecurity. Sovereignty is the clarity that needs no ranking. The warrior rises by dissolving the illusions, never by dominating the comparison. Why thinking you're smarter than or better than somebody is unrealized baggage. Because superiority is just unprocessed insecurity, pretending to be intelligence. The moment you need to feel above someone, you're dragging around the emotional luggage and the baggage of the situation you never unpacked. It's not confidence. It's inherited fear wearing a smug mask. Because comparison is the museum where your ego stores its oldest wound. Thinking you're better is never about the other person. It's about the identity you're terrified to outgrow. Superiority is the baggage that keeps you from rising into your unborrowed awareness. And see, that's the thing. All your awareness, your wisdom, it's all unborrowed, unrehearsed, uneducated. It's about now. But authentic awareness doesn't elevate you over people. It evaluates you beyond illusions. The warrior doesn't need to be smarter or better. The warrior simply refuses to carry the heavy, outdated luggage of hierarchy, judgment, and inherited ego scripts. Superiority is baggage. Sovereignty is the freedom and sovereignty of life. Why thinking you're smarter than somebody is a museum illusion. Because the mind is a museum. It's all ancient because the mind never gets to the present moment. Because why thinking you're smarter or better than somebody is a museum illusion. Because superiority is just insecurity wearing a crown made of yesterday's conditioning. The moment you think you're above someone, you've already fallen into the oldest trap of the museum mind, polishing your ego instead of expanding your awareness. Superiority is not strength, it's a relic, because the mind invents hierarchies to avoid confronting its own limitations. So arrogance is just avoiding confronting your own limitations. When you feel the need to be smarter, better, or more evolved, that's never wisdom. That's inherited programming replaying its ancient script of comparison and survival. Awareness does not compare, only the museum does. Because the true awareness doesn't rise above people. It rises beyond illusions. The warrior never needs to be better than anyone. The warrior simply refuses to be trapped in the ego's dusty exhibits of judgment, hierarchy, and self-importance. Superiority is a cage. Awareness is the frontier, showing your debonair flair to feel lively, adventurous, and intuitive, revolutionary revelations to flow from you. If you want why indoctrinated education is your mind museum is museum illusions, because indoctrinated education recycles inheritance and calls it intelligence. It never teaches perception. It teaches obedience to ancestral frameworks. Students never evolve. They're just reenacting the nervous system of people who lived centuries ago. That's never learning. That's a museum maintenance, because the curriculum is a shrine to the past, not a gateway to awareness. Memorization replaces realization. Repetition replaces revelations. The system rewards a student who can polish the old exhibit, never the one who can see beyond it. Because indoctrinated education builds identity, never wisdom. It hands you a role, the good student, the expert, and the credentialed one, and traps you inside it. Identity becomes a relic, a cage, a glass case. Awareness can't breathe in a museum. And see, that's the thing. And it's like chaos's breath for awareness. Why college degrees, PhD programming are museum illusions, because college degrees are just polished relics from a world that no longer exists. They were built for an economy of obedience, never a frontier of originality. The system hands you a certificate, never a consciousness. Their credentials, never clarity. Because PhD programming trains you to defend conclusions instead of dissolving illusions. It worships the theories, citations, and intellectual ancestry like sacred artifacts. You never become wiser if you become a curator of someone else's thinking. How is education teaching us other people's thinking and knowing? Because both systems mistakes modernization for mastery and inheritance for intelligence. They reward repetition, never realization. They build identity, never awareness. They turn the mind into a museum, exhibits static, defended, outdated, while your unborrowed awareness awaits outside, uncontained and undefeated. Why college degrees create unknown barriers between the college educated and the skilled craftsmen, and the blue-collar people. Because degrees create a false hierarchy that has nothing to do with mastery. The college-educated often assume their credentials equal superiority, while craftsmen carry embodied wisdom earned from their friction, repetition, and nowality. This invisible divide is never true. It's conditioning. Education is a cultural conditioning to follow. Warrior-wise awareness sees the craftsman as the real curriculum. Because indoctrinated education trains people to trust theory over lived competence. A degree can make someone believe they know more, even when they've never built, repaired, or shaped, or created anything with their hands. Craftsmen operate from veracity, the truth of what the veracity, the authenticity of what expands people. This mismatch forms a silent barrier built by mind, never by merit, because the credentialed identity becomes a museum exhibit that disconnects people from practical wisdom. Once someone identifies as educated, they may unconsciously distance themselves from those who learn through grit, craft, and embodied skilled craftsmanship. The barrier isn't real, it's ego. It's ego architecture. The warrior dissolves it by honoring mastery wherever it lives, while the college education is a museum of egotistical illusions. Because college education mistakes memorized information for awakened intelligence. The system rewards a student who can repeat the past, never the one who can perceive present. It builds ego, never awareness, a polished identity created from yesterday's theories, because degrees inflate the mind while starving the awareness. And see, everything you learn through education stays in the museum mind, and because it never gets to present moment. The credentials becomes a costume the ego hides inside. People walk out while a title, never clarity with confidence, never consciousness. It's an illusion of superiority built on inherited frameworks. Because indoctrinated education turns the mind into a museum exhibit instead of a frontier instrument of innovation, natural, streaming, trend-setting, rebellious, unlimited, ubiquitous mastery every day, naturally trend-setting through life. The student becomes a curator of old ideas instead of creating the fresh novelties of your own inner terrain. Ego thrives in the museum. Awareness suffocates in the mind museum. The warrior sees the illusion and steps out of the exhibit entirely. While egotistical arrogance, know-it-all ignorance, and stubbornness are inherited mind-invented museum illusions. Because egotistical arrogance is just an ancestral insecurity pretending to be superiority. The mind never invents arrogance to empower you. It invented it to protect old wounds passed down through generation. What looks like confidence is usually inherited fear wearing a louder costume. It's never strength, it's museum dust. Because the know-it-all ignorance is the mind defending what is memorized, never what it understands. The ego clings to I already know because it's terrified of the unknown. This mindset is never intelligence, it's inherited programming, replaying ancient scripts. Ignorance becomes a shield, never a veracity or authenticity, because stubbornness is a museum where outdated identities refuse to evolve. Stubbornness isn't strength, it's the ego's refusal to release inherited beliefs. It's a mind-gripping old exhibits instead of stepping into new awareness. The warrior sees stubbornness for what it is, a cage disguised as conviction. Stubbornness is a cage disguised as conviction. Why mindsets are mind-invented museum blockages and barriers. Because a mindset is just mental artifacts pretended to be reality. The mind freezes one interpretation, frames it, labels it, calls it how things are. That's never truth. It's a display piece. A mindset blocks you because it traps you inside yesterday's conclusions. Because mindsets are inherited, exhibits, and they're never self-authored awareness. Most mindsets aren't yours. They're hand-me-downs from parents, culture, school, religion, and fear. You think you're choosing, but you're reenacting. The blockage isn't the world. It's the museum you're unconsciously maintaining. Because every mindset is a limitation disguised as identity. The moment you say, "This is just who I am," you've locked yourself behind glass. Mindsets unblock imagination, innovation, and energetic clarity because they keep you loyal to the past. The warrior doesn't have mindsets. The warrior has awareness. Why personal growth, self-help, self-improvement stay stuck in the museum thinking and knowing old loops. Because self-improvement tries to upgrade the ego instead of dissolving it. Most personal growth work polishes the same identity that created the problem. It teaches you to optimize the museum exhibit, never to walk out of the museum. You stay stuck because you're improving the cage instead of escaping it. Because personal growth recycles the same inherited mindsets it claims to fix. The scripts, affirmation, and mindset shifts are built from the same thinking that created the limitations. You loop because you're using yesterday's tools and scripts to rise into tomorrow or today's awareness. Nothing fresh emerges from recycled frameworks because self-help focuses on managing the mind instead of awakening awareness. Mind management is maintenance, never liberation. As long as you're rearranging thoughts, beliefs, emotions, you're still living inside the museum. Awareness rises only when you stop fixing the mind and start witnessing it through innovation, intuition, and your natural free-flowing energy. Why personal growth, self-improvement stay stuck in the museum thinking old loops because self-improvement tries to upgrade the ego instead of dissolving it. Most personal growth work polishes the same identity that created the problem. It teaches you to optimize the museum exhibit, never to walk out of the museum. You stay stuck because you're improving the cage instead of escaping it. Because personal growth recycles the same inherited mindsets it claims. Personal growth recycles the same inherited mindset it claims to fix. And see, you never want to fix the mixes. You always want to rise above them. The scripts, affirmation, and mindset shifts are built from the same thinking that created the limitation. You loop because you're using yesterday's tools to rise into awareness. And anytime you use a tool, you got to think about it. If you use wisdom and innovation, it's a flow of now. Because self-help focuses on managing the mind instead of awakening awareness. Mind management is maintenance, never liberation. As long as you're rearranging the thoughts, beliefs, and emotions, you're still inside the museum. Awareness rises only when you stop fixing the mind and start witnessing it through innovation, imagination, and your here and now natural talents. Why museum language keeps you stuck in yesterday's thinking. because museum language recycles inherited words that carry inherited limits. You use the same words that got you into it, you stay the same. Every phrase you were taught is soaked in someone else's worldview. When you speak from old vocabulary, you think from old frameworks. Language becomes a leash, subtle, polite, invisible, but still a leash. Because museum language forces you to describe the present with tools built from the past. And if you let go of tools and start using wisdom, innovation, and things that keep you out of going into the thinking mind, you'll rise out of that bind. You can never rise from fresh awareness using words designed to maintain old identities. The moment you use outdated language, you collapse your perception back into yesterday's meaning. Your mind loops because your language loops. Because museum language keeps your awareness trapped in pre-approved interpretations. Words shape perception. If the words are old, the perception is old. Museum language keeps you thinking inside inherited categories instead of sensing the sovereign clarity of here and now. The warrior speaks from awareness, never from archives. Why, liberating lingo, energized listening, maverick questions, energetic liberation, politically incorrect inspiration, articulate aspirations, and revolutionary revelations destroyed my inherited mindsets, mind-invented programming, destroying my museum of limitation. Why, these forces destroy inherited mindsets and museum programming because lingo now wires your perception by breaking the linguistic cages. You never know, you didn't know you lived in the cages of yesterday until you destroy them. Language is the architecture of awareness. Most of your vocabulary was inherited, never chosen. Liberating lingo shatters those inherited word walls and replaces them with voltage that awakens, never repeats. It destroys museum limitations by giving you a tongue that speaks from sovereignty, never ancestry. Because energized listening and maverick questions bypass the mind and detonate the programming beneath it. Energized listening hears what your conditioning hides. Maverick questions pierce the illusions your mind protects. Together they expose the script you've been unconsciously performing and burn them down with clarity. This is the way revolutionary revelations erupt, never from thinking, but from seeing, witnessing, and expressing aspirations. Because energetic liberation and politically incorrect inspiration free you from the roles your lineage assigned you. Energetic liberation dissolves nervous system loops you inherited. Politically incorrect inspiration breaks social obedience you were trained to maintain. These forces never improve your museum, they demolish it. They articulate aspirations that come from your frontier, never your programming. And see, that's the thing. You break free from the mind museum and get out into the architecture of Mother Nature and the earth, you awaken all your trend-setting talents to rise, shine, and energize every day. And I want to thank you for being here. I'm Robert Wilson with Cowboy Wisdom Podcasts, and we'll be here Thursday night. And may your life be as blessed as you are a blessing to the world, and may your days always flow with healthy, wealthy energy. Thank you and good night.